Then we are learning Taanis Daf Yud Beis. We left off on Daf Yud Aleph Amid Beis, 11 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Mar Ukva Ikla Leginzak. Now we're going to have over here a continuation of the sugya of Taanis Sho'os, fasting 4 hours. The question will be whether this Taanis Sho'os is considered a fast. What do I mean, whether it's considered a fast? That if a person undertook to make a Taanis Sho'os, are they bound by that undertaking? If it's not considered a fast, then if they want, they can break their fast. Another nafkamina to understand whether a fast 4 hours is considered a fast or not is as we will be learning, there's a Tefilla called Anenu that we say today. Does one say Tefillas Anenu in a Taanis Sho'os? That's more or less the two nafkaminas as to whether a Taanis Sho'os is considered a fast or not. We have been learning right now that a Taanis Sho'os is considered a fast. However, on Daf Yud Beis, we're going to see the unique opinion of Rab Chizda as to exactly what type of fasting 4 hours is considered a Taanis Sho'os. And according to Rab Chizda, the way we will understand Rab Chizda, when a person will undertake the fast until noon, that will not be considered a Taanis Sho'os. As we will go through the next 2 dafim, what we will begin to better understand is that there are different types of fast days. First of all, we already learned the Taanis Yachid versus the Taanis Tzibur. Like when we began the sugya on Daf Yud, that if you don't have, according to Rab Meir, that the 17th of Mar Cheshvan should be the 3rd of the Yoder rains. If the 17th came and went without rain, so then Yechidim begin to fast. So there's something called a Taanis Yachid, which is much less severe. Then you have, after Rosh Chodesh Kislev, if it still didn't rain, then the Chachamim, they enact a communal fast. That's called a Taanis Tzibur, which is a more severe type of fast days. Truth be told, even in Taanis Tzibur, there were the first 3 that we learned about on Daf Yud that were not that severe relative to. Then we're going to learn about a second series of 3 that are more severe. But a Taanis Tzibur is considered a more chamur, dika fast day than a Taanis Yachid. Now, we're going to learn on Daf Yud Beis that a Taanis Yachid, and if a person vows to make a Taanis Yachid, it's not your typical vow. When a person makes a vow, the only way they are allowed to break the vow is by doing hataras nadarim. If not, they are bound by it. But we don't view a Taanis Yachid as a bona fide vow. And the example that we will give, we'll compare it to if a person takes money and they designate this money for tzedakah, $100. If they want, they can use that $100 bill for themselves as long as they repay it with another $100 bills. It's a unique din about tzedakah. And similarly, we're going to find by a fast that loiva adam kan isoi upoireya, a person who made a vow. There's many ways of learning these chazals, but we're going to learn the way the Rosh learns it. If a person makes a vow to fast tomorrow, if during the tomorrow they're not feeling well, they can break their fast as long as they pay it back later, which is a big insight into the understanding of exactly what is a Taanis Yachid. Regarding a Taanis Tzibur, we will also learn that there is a machlokes whether the Chachamim, this is during the times of the Mishnah and the Gemara, whether the Chachamim in Goyla, which means any place outside Eretz Yisrael, were empowered on the same level as the rabbinate and as the Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael, and perhaps in Goyla there isn't ever a very strong Taanis Tzibur. So we're going to learn that there are many levels of fast days. There is the most severe fast day, that's a Taanis Tzibur that was enacted in Eretz Yisrael. You have a Taanis Tzibur that's imposed in outside Eretz Yisrael. You have a Taanis Yachid that's for a full day. You have a Taanis Yachid that's only for part of the day, or a Taanis Sho'os. All of them need to have a Kabbalah Satainis. And finally, the final category will be what we call a Taanis Cholon. That if a person has a dream and they feel that the dream has some sort of very negative connotation, and we are able to channel that negativity through fasting, to be yoitza, to fulfill whatever suffering we need to undergo by fasting. That's called a Taanis Cholam. So it's a Taanis Yachid. It's an individual fast day, but it has a lot of power. And we will see that a Taanis Cholam should be had right after the bat fast. delaying a Taanis Yachid is completely permitted. The lenga Taanis Cholim is ruining the whole fast. Now, if we'll have time on today's daf, on daf Yud Beis Amud Beis, we'll begin learning the Mishnah that will continue the procedure of the fasting in the event that after the first 3 bahabs of the Taanis Tzibur, we were still unanswered, there was still no rain. So we're going to begin learning what happens in the second series of 3 fast days. And if we'll have even more time, we'll go all the way to the bottom of the daf. We're going to learn about the uniqueness of the end of the fast, of what we will call mincha of a fast day, that is the most auspicious time of the fast day. And when we are going to ask for Hashem, for Rachmanis, it should primarily be done all the way towards the end of the fast. So on Yom Kippur now, that is when we have Ne'ilah. The Rebbe always spoke about that the Mamash Raivan, the end of the day is the Eis Ratzon. That's when the Rebbe always spoke. That's when the Rebbe gave $1 for tzedakah and Chevra much more. So let us start again on Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis by the little star over here, Mar Ukva. Says the Gemara, Mar Ukva Ikla le Ginzak. Mar Ukva once traveled to a place called Ginzak, and Bo Minei, and they asked of him over there, if someone undertakes to fast a partial fast day, literally shois means hours. We understand Taanis shois to mean I'll fast until midday. We'll see more insights and more opinions as to exactly what is this partial fast day. But if someone undertook to fast a partial fast day, is it considered a fast day? Number one, are they bound to keep it? Do they have to keep it? If it's not called a fast day, then they can break it. Number two, do they say anenu during the hours of fast or not? And Elyahu biyadei Mar Ukva didn't know. They asked him another question, not related. Kankanim shel nachrim, earthenware jugs in which goyim store their wine. Now we know that the yayin of an akum is either going to be asun midoraisa yayin nesach, even if it's not the yayin nesach, but it's certainly going to be asun midrabanan. It's called the yayin stam. Earthenware, any keli made out of earth, absorbs, and it cannot properly or fully be purged. Now, normally when we speak about the need of purging, of removing the tam that became nivla in the keli, in the walls of the keli, normally it's in the context of we use the keli for heat. We cooked something in there. And indeed, klei cheres will never be fully poilet. Here, wine is not cooked in the earthenware, but it soaks in there for a long time. And there is a concept in halacha called kavush kimevushel, that if something is soaking for 24 hours or more, even if it's cold, it does permeate, its taste goes into the walls, and you can't properly remove it. So if someone has these kankanim, and now it's cleaned, is there any way that I can use it for kosher wine or not? Asurim oy mutarim. And for question number 2, Elyahu biyadei, he didn't know. And question number 3, Bameh Shimish Moshe Kol Shivus Yimei HaMeloim. During the 7 days of inauguration, from Chav Gimel Adar until Rosh Chodesh Nisan, where Moshe Rabbeinu was doing all of the avodah. Question is, what begodim did he wear? And the way Rashi here, 6 lines before the bottom, explains that question regarding the begodim that God gives to the kahuna, big day kahuna. We knew that Moshe Rabbeinu, our Gemara knew, he did not wear it because it says that Aaron and his children should wear those begodim. And not only that, Moshe Rabbeinu dressed Aaron and his children all during the Shivus Yimei HaMeloim. So Zicher, our Gemara holds, he did not wear the big day kahuna. Question is, did he wear his big day choil? Did he wear his common clothing, which is difficult to say? Or was there some sort of unique special garments that Moshe Rabbeinu made for himself or had made for himself that he wore during those 7 days? You should know that there's another Gemara that's wondering whether Moshe Rabbeinu had a din of a kohen. Remember that? Whether Moshe Rabbeinu was a kohen gadol or whether he was not considered a kohen gadol. L'cha'ura, according to those who hold that Moshe Rabbeinu also had the status of a kohen gadol, at least during those 7 days, then maybe he did wear the big day kahuna gedoyle, he was a kohen gadol. But what we're for l'cha'ura, the way Rashi at least, or the Mefarish understands our kasha, Moshe Rabbeinu was not considered a kohen. Therefore, big day kahuna he did not wear. Did he wear special begadim or not? You should know when it comes to the big day kahuna, there's a big question as to, is the bigadim a din in the kahuna, or is the big day kahuna a din in the avoida? In other words, if the avoida that's being done has to be done by someone wearing those bigadim, then also you can l'chayra say that Moshe Rabbeinu wore the big day kahuna, because it's a din in the avoida. The avoida has to happen in those bigadim. If the bigadim is a din in kahuna, if we're going to say that Moshe Rabbeinu was not a kohen, then he was not wearing those bigadim. But again, did he wear his common weekday clothing? So that was the third question. And here for the third time, Lehava biyadei, and Marukva, it's not that she didn't know the answer. Say that when Marukva went to the Beis Medrash, he brought those questions into the Beis Medrash. Azal v'shol be'midrasha, and Amrulei, and they told to Marukva, who later relayed the answer to the people that lived in Ginzak, all regarding all three. And Rishon, Achrin, Achrin. The halacha is misanim l'shois, as we finished learning in the sugya above, like Rafuna holds, that yes, that there is a concept called a hour fast, which you are bound by it, you're bound by it, and umispalalim tefillas Taanis. It's considered such a level of a fast that when you undertook, that we also just finished learning in the last year, that to undertake any type of fast, including a hour fast, you have to make a declaration. Now, truth be told, there's really a machlokes whether it has to be an oral declaration. There are some who hold that a mental designation is also good enough, but there has to be an undertaking, a Kabbalah Taanis. If there was a proper Kabbalah Taanis, then you are bound to keep the fast, and including Yosei Anenu. Number two, right, 4 lines before the bottom, regarding the second question, Kankanim shel nachrim. Yes, they absorb the yayin nesach or yayin stam, and no, you cannot properly purge it. However, there are 2 ways that you will be allowed to use it. One way will be letting 12 months pass without you using the keli at all. La'achar shneim asar chodesh, the tam, the taste that was swallowed in the walls of the keli, that's nivla, becomes completely pogum. You know, there's different levels of pogum. There's after 24 hours, it's not a ben yoimai, but then you have the concept of a full year. Now, guys, don't forget, we're not learning Shulchan Aruch, and none of that we're learning Gemara. But this concept is also brought down by some poskim. It's sometimes used when people have very expensive chinaware that they inherited from the grandparents who never were not kosher yet, and that you can't kasher it. Just there is such a thing brought down in halacha, but don't jump to say, just because 12 months passed, you're always good to go. When we learn Pesachim, we spoke about that we are so careful when it comes to gebrachs, that we don't even use kalim that were used for gebrachs. So how can you use your kalim every Pesach when on Shmini, on the last day of Pesach, we dafka make a brach? So for that, we use this 12 months past, even though it's not full 12 months. So this concept is used at times in halacha.
I think for dishwasher racks, some people do it also.
Okay, very good, Danny. Not for Pesach, but for the year. Rashi here brings something down amazing. Rashi here, 4 lines from the bottom, where the Mefarish says that if a person would want to use those jugs during the 12 months without waiting for the 12 months, there is another solution to halachically purge the taste of the yayin stam or the yayin nesach from it, and that's to do irui. Rashi says over here that you fill up the barrel or the jug with water, stam water, and you leave the water in there for 24 hours. Not 1 time, but 3 times, because earthenware doesn't fully spit it out. That's another solution. That it's not ein kanamakim to go a lot into the dinim of kasher and kalim, but this is a very important liner over here. But if you waited the 12 months, you don't have to soak it 3 times. You don't have to soak it 1 time. You're good to go. And the third line from the bottom, says the Gemara, they said in the Beis Medrash, they told Mar Ukva, who later related this to the Anshe Ginzak, that you're right. Hitaka did not wear big day kahuna, but it doesn't make sense that Moshe Rabbeinu served in the Beis HaMikdash wearing his big day chayil, his weekday clothing. So what did he put on? B'chaluk lavan. He put on a white jalaba. Now you know where the Moroccans get it from. And B'chlal, it's important to know that even by Yos and Chabad, that until the Rebbe Maharash, the Rabbeim, they wore white. They wore white. It was the Rebbe Maharash and on that made it for reasons, particularly for reasons of humility, that even the Rebbe wore dark black garments. which is all connected to the Churban. But l'chora, when Mashiach is going to come back, all of us will be on Shabbos, big day, Lavan. However, there's a detail, Rav Kahana Masni, he added another detail, that there were special white, simple garments that were made from Moshe for those 7 days where Moshe Rabbeinu served as the Kohen Gadol, but it wasn't just Chalak Lavan, but with the detail, She'en Lo Imra, there was no hem, there were no seams. And that's a sugya that we learned in Shkalim. Remember the Kohanim that would go into the Lishkas of the Shkalim, they would talk the whole time. No one should suspect that they're putting a coin in their mouth. If you have a hem in your pants or in the bottom of these robes, then maybe you can stick a coin in there, God forbid. And even though Moshe Rabbeinu, there's a concept called Vihi Yisem Nekiyim Mahashem Yisrael. A person should behave in a way where he's beyond suspicion. So number one, it was pashut, it was white. And number two, he did not have a hem. It was impossible. Had someone else done that with these begadim and would have wanted to take something, it would be impossible. They wouldn't have where to put it. Okay. At Khan, the three questions, but the ikr was, what we finished now, Daf Yud Aleph, is that there's a concept called Taanis Sho'os. Now, Chavra, these Gemaras, unlike many Dafim that we had last week, that was Agadata, both Daf Yud Beis and Daf Yud Gimel, it's not Agadata, but it's foundational Gemaras, which will really shed light in the understanding of all these levels of fast days, like we spoke on in the intro. There's a Taanis Yachid, the full day, a Taanis Yachid, the hours, a Taanis the Tzibur of Eretz Yisrael, then this Bagoyla, Taanis Cholam. We're going to learn the Gemara with Mefarish. There are many other ways of learning the Gemara that will really change everything, as it always is the case, but particularly over here. So says the Gemara, Amar Rab Chizda, Daf Yud Beis on the top. Yes, that there is a concept called a fast 4 hours. But listen to this line. That's only if the person doesn't eat until it gets dark. Now, let me take a step back. We already know from the Mishnah that when it comes to fast days, a fast day doesn't have to be 25 hours. A fast day that begins with Alois HaShachar is not called a Taanis Sho'os. As we know today, other than Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, all the other fast days that we are bound by halacha to keep, we only begin fasting from the morning, and it's not a Taanis Sho'os. So the statement of Rab Chizda is very difficult to understand. He's saying, an hour fast day is considered a fast day. It means if you made a Kabbalah, you have to keep it, you say Anenu, but that's only if you fast until the end of the day. So what does he mean by that? So Amalei Abaya, whoa. If that's the only valid fast day, Taanis Ma'al Yasihi. That's a proper fast day. That's not a Taanis Sho'os. So again, the way we're going to learn the Gemara. So it clarifies Rab Chizda loy. Rab Chizda is saying that I also have the words that there is something called a hours fast, a Taanis Sho'os. But that only means in the following case, and now let's read it inside. The imlach imluche. A person changed his mind to yes, fast. What do I mean to change his mind and fast? Explains the Mefarish. A person begins his day without any Kabbalah to fast, without any intention to fast. But it happened that this person did not eat, did not drink until sometime in the middle of the day. So it's Chatzoit, it's in the middle of the day. That's the example the Mefarish gives. And the person realized, wow, from Alois, I didn't eat, I didn't drink. Now he's deciding to fast until the end of the day. He says, since I already fasted half of the day, for whatever reason, this person feels that he wants to get a credited fast day. He says, I might as well fast until the end of the day. Now, we already learned that you have to be Mekabel the Taanis. He's Mekabel the Taanis. He says, I will be in a state of fasting until the end of the day. According to Rab Chizda, that's the only Taanis Sho'os that's considered a Taanis. It's de facto, this person fasted for the whole day, from Alois until we'll see, until it gets dark. It's not until Shkia, as we know today. The Chiddush of Rab Chizda is that if a person only undertakes to fast what we will call until midday, according to the way we are understanding Rab Chizda, that's nothing. Has no validity. It's not called a fast. If you took such a Kabbalah and by 10 a.m. you're hungry, you can eat because it was nothing. There's no such a thing as a Taanis Sho'os until Chatzos. Every Taanis choice has to be until the end of the day. What if it's until the end of the day? So why is it called a Taanis choice? It's proper day. That's the pshat. That if a person never vowed, never made a Kabbalah until some of the day already went, those hours will not count for a fast, because as we learned on Daf Yud Aleph, if you don't make a Kabbalah, if you don't make a hachlot, if you don't undertake the fast, then just because you did not eat or drink, it doesn't count at all for a fast day. You made a Kabbalah, but you only made a Kabbalah when there's only a few hours left in the day. That is where Rab Chizda agrees that there's something called a Taanis Sho'os. And that will be in disagreement to what we learned yesterday, what we learned in the previous year. What we learned in the previous year is that any type of Taanis Sho'os is valid. A few hours of the day, according to the Mefarish, a few hours of the night. If you're makabel to fast, from night, not the whole night, until 10 p.m., whatever you undertook, it's considered a Taanis Sho'os, not according to Rab Chizda. Very important. Now, many other...
So Rab Chizda is arguing with what Mar Ukva learned in the yeshiva there?
No, because Mar Ukva only has...
Is this an explanation of Rab Mar?
He explains, defining, he's limiting Taanis Sho'os. Very good. Rab Chizda, according to the Mefarish, argues with what we learned in the last year on Daf Yud Aleph on Beis, especially according to the Mefarish, who holds, Rashi holds, the Talmud of Rashi, he's quoting his teacher, Rashi, that you can make a Taanis Sho'os also part night, part day, part night. All you need to do is to make a Kabbalah. And it doesn't have to be until midnight. It can be a Makabel that from Shkia until 10 p.m. According to what with Afuna, according to what we learned last year, that's called a fast. According to Rab Chizda, that's nothing. Garnished. The only Taanis Sho'os also has to be a fast that goes until the end of the day. But why is it not called a full day? Because you were makabel to fast when you are already in middle of the day. Another detail: if a person ate and drank until noon, according to Rab Chizda, they cannot be makabel Taanis. It's nothing. Also, that's another detail. Since they fasted already until noon, so they didn't eat or drink, but they didn't do it with a kavana and with a kabbalah for a fast. Now they say, since I'm up to here and I didn't eat, let me just go until the end of the day. That's the only Taanis Sho'os that is considered the Taanis Sho'os. Let's go back. Rab Chizda, all consistent with his Ashita, kol Taanis shelo shakol avachamon lav shmei Taanis. Very, very clear over here. There's no such a thing as you made even a partial fast. It's not a halachic fast if the Shkia Sachama did not happen. Toisvis and the other Rishonim make it clear, Shkia does not mean Shkia. Shkia means Tseis, but it means the beginning of Tseis. And as we also know, just to be cognitive, that when it comes to the end of Yom Kippur, the end of the fast of Yom Kippur by us, it's much later than the end of all the other fast days. But Shkia definitely does not mean the beginning of Shkia. And just a halacha l'mais just here in LA for us who follow the shita of the Alter Rebbe, who has a unique opinion regarding Shkia, and says that to cover, not to differentiate between summer and winter, you look at Shkia on your Zmanim, you add 31 minutes. That's what Rabbi Shusterman says here will cover all of the Zmanim, and that's the earliest that you can break your fast. Now Yom Kippur we fast more, but that will be the end. Okay,
Rabbi, according to Reb Chizda, is there a distinction as to whether the fast has to start the night before versus starting in the morning?
It can start in the morning. In other words, no one holds it has to start very good. Now, again, I just want to emphasize, this is one way. There are other Rishonim that learned Reb Chizda so different that it will blow your mind. But let's follow one mahal. We don't paskin like Reb Chizda the way we understood it, just to make it clear. We subscribe to a part-day fast. It's very common, like we quoted the Alter Rebbe, Igeres HaTshuva, speaks about fasting until noon. Okay, but that's not Rab Chizda. Meisvein, we learned in the Mishnah, Anshe Mishmar, Misanim v'loy mashlimin. As we learned on Daf Yud Aleph from Beis, that Ein Talmud Chacham Rishoy Leisha v'Taanis Mepnei Shemamayim b'Malach Hashemayim. Yeah, you're going to be a teacher. You're doing avodas hakodesh. You're groisach chassid. You're fasting. You won't teach properly. So listen, the people that are in the Mishmar, both Kohanim and the Leviim, what happens if on their day of working in the Beis Hamikdash, it's one of these fast days? We're speaking about one of these tiny Bahab. So we're going to learn later in the Mishnah, they don't complete their fast day. Because when you're fasting and you're working in the Beis HaMikdash, most people don't work as good when they're fasting. So they don't fast. Well, hold on. The Mishnah says the words misanin. Misanin means it's called a fast. It's only that they fast part of the day. The fact that it's called misanin is mashma, that even though they don't complete it, even though they don't fast until tzeis, it's still called misanin. That l'chayra means it's a tiny shois. And another detail, tiny shois from our Gemara, from here, doesn't have to mean until chatzois. Again, according to the Mefarish, it's whatever you are makabel. A person can say, I'm going to fast for 3 hours. So they fast for a little bit, but it's called a fast. Answers the Gemara, no, the word in the Mishnah, misanin, doesn't mean halachically. It means another sugya that we learned last week, that whenever the community is in distress, a person should never remove themselves from that distress. It's called a fast, not a halachic fast day. Since everyone is fasting the bahab for the rain, they are doing avodas hakodesh. They have to work in the Beis HaMikdash. The Chazal told them, don't fast the whole day. Fast a little bit. It's not halachically. It's only l'tzeuri nafshi ba'almahu. So like this, you are included in the tzad of everyone else, but it's not a halachic fast day at all, according to Rav Chisda. Next, Tashema, to Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Tzadok or Rabbi Tzadok, Ani mibnei banav shel sinna of ben Binyamin. So we know, as we'll have in this Masechta, that when the second Beis HaMikdash was built, in the beginning, there was a lack of wood to be put on the Mizbeach, and 9 families contributed the wood in the beginning of the Second Temple era, and they were awarded that on that day that they gave the wood, their families will always have the merit to give the wood in the Beis HaMikdash, even during the later years where the coffers of the Second Temple had enough money to buy all the wood they needed. And not only would they bring the wood for the Beis HaMikdash, but they would celebrate that day as a Yom Tov, which is really what happened to every Yid who brought a korban. It was a private Yom Tov, but here was a large family that they celebrated the Yom Tov. Now, the family of Sina'ov from the tribe of Binyamin, their day of Yom Tov was the 10th day of Av. Whether this story happened Bisman Bayesheni, or whether this story happened after the destruction of the Second Temple, is really linked to the question, whether did Jews fast Tisha B'Av during the times of the second Beis HaMikdash when we were under Roman occupation. So we mentioned it 2 Masechtas ago, whatever it was. But so either this was when they were fasting Tisha B'Av Bisman Habayis, or the story happened right after the Churban Beis HaMikdash. Point is, when Tisha B'Av falls on Shabbos, what do we do? When Tisha B'Av falls on Shabbos today, it's pushed to Sunday. Sunday is the 10th day of Av. For them, for this family, the 10th of Av is a Yom Tov. So they have counter values. Should they fast? Should they not fast? Now, until today, you should know, you can't compare a boy by Yom fast to a Taanis that's called a nitcha, even though we have to fast on a nitcha. But it has a leak. It's not as strong as. So he says that I am from the family of Sinov ben Binyamin, upamach haschal Tisha B'Av, liyos b'Shabbos, Tisha B'Av fell on Shabbos, and therefore everyone delayed the fast of Tisha B'Av as we do to Sunday, which is the 10th of Av. The 10th of Av is the Yom Tov of their family. So what did we do? We made a compromise. His aninu boy v'loy hish lam nuhu. We began the fast, but we didn't complete it. Again, the words are fat. They fasted. It's mashma that it had a din of a fast. Why? And you should know that the Tur, based on this Gemara, Taanis Yud Beis says, or he brings some who hold that if you have a Baal Bris means the father, the sandik, and the moil, and it's on the 10th day of Av, which is on Sunday. So it's a Tisha B'Av Taanis, that's Nitcha. He holds that they don't fast the whole day based on this. The Tur brings other opinions that disagree. No, it's they compromise. They fasted, but not the whole day. Here again, the words v'hisaninu mashma that it has a din of a fast. So Hassan nami litzauri nafshi ba'almahu, same concept of not excluding yourself from the community, but it doesn't mean, according to Rav Chisda, that it had any halachic status of a fast at all. Nachabot Tashema, another attempt to challenge against Rav Chisda. The Amar Rabbi Yechanan, if a person says what Rabbi Yechanan said. That I am undertaking a fast until when I come home. Rabbi Yochanan did not come home after Tzeis, or didn't necessarily always come home after Tzeis, and he would say that regularly. And that L'choira, again, he did a Kabbalah, but if a Taanis shows that doesn't go until the end of the day, and let me go another detail, Danny, according to the Mefarish, that didn't begin with you de facto fasting from the beginning of the day. If that's not called a Taanis Tzibur, then these words have no meaning. So the Gemara says, yeah, Rabbi Yochanan knew that. Rabbi Yochanan did not want to socialize. People invited him, come to me, come here, come there. Why don't you join me for supper? So the easiest way for him to get out of all of those social obligations is to say, oh, I'm fasting. So he would make that statement, Gavaldik. Hey, you have a Taanis at Sheyaveh Lebeisi. Hassan answers the Gemara, L'shamutei nafshe mibein nesiu da'avet. The Nasi, listen, as time anyone would invite Rabbi Yochanan, he didn't have to respond to them. But if the Nasi, the head of the government, would invite Rabbi Yochanan to eat, Rabbi Yochanan not taking the invitation would insult him. So he had a smart way. He would make a declaration in the Beis Medrash, I'm fasting until when I get home. But really, he knew that it doesn't have any binding koyach, and the household of the Nesiah were not as learned, and it worked. Everyone was happy. Oh, I would come, but I can't. I'm fasting. The kid said, Rav Chizda is not refuted. Amar Shmuel, Kol Taanis Shelo Kibul Olav Be'od Yom. The Be'od Yom means it has to be done in the previous day. We quoted last year the machlokes between the Rosh and the Rambam. Anyways, over here, Shita Shmuel is whatever level of fast you have to accept it on the previous day, and if you didn't, Lav Shmei Taanis. Now the question is, you didn't, but you fasted. Does it have any connection to a halachic fast day or not? And again, as we will see, there are many levels of a fast day. So maybe it's not considered a higher fast day. Maybe it's epis a fast day. The Yosef, and if you sat and you fasted without a proper Kabbalah, according to Shmuel, day prior, another way of understanding, maybe you can break it. Maybe you can break it in the middle of the day, even though your intention was to fast. But if you didn't do a Kabbalah, it's nothing. So the Gemara says it's nothing. Amarabba Barshila, dummy, it's compared lemapucha the malya zika. You were like bellows filled with ear. In other words, you're filled with ear. You're not filled with food. But God, it's nothing. It has no status of any sort of fast. You can break it when you want. You can't say Aneinu and many other applications. Now let's accept.
They're arguing on Reb Chizda, right? Because Reb Chizda clearly says you can accept the middle of the day.
Reb Chizda is saying that you can accept the middle of the day. That's correct. Because Reb Chizda holds that you can start the middle of the day. That's the leniency of Reb Chizda. Many people learn that's the whole, and everyone argues you cannot start a fire. You can never start it in the beginning of the day. You have to start it either in the morning or at night. And you have to be mekabel it prior. Very good, Danny. Okay, good. Now, the aim is mekabel.
Rabbi, to mekabel it the day before, it has to be before Shkia?
Amos mekabel, another big machlokes. When before? Now, David, for sure before Shkia. For the question is, does it have to be during the Tefilla of Mincha, dafka during davening, or can it be done during the time of the afternoon in which you are allowed to daven Mincha? That's the question. So Rav says, b'mincha. B'mincha doesn't mean in the Tefillah. The Mincha means bizman Mincha. Now, by the way, there's another machlokes. When is man Mincha? Guys, we learn Psachim. So we have Mincha Gedoyla, Mincha Ketana. Many Rishonim hold, that's the big question. What's the Iker Mincha? Just because once a year we brought the Korban Tamid Shalab ben Arbaim early because of Shabbos and because of the Korban Pesach. But if we're going to go that the main time of Mincha is Mincha Ketana, which is 9.5 hours after halachic midday, let's go with that. From that time onwards, say the words that we just had before, that lemachar ehye b'tainis. Or if you want, you can add the words b'li neded, but we're going to learn more in Amid Beis. That b'chlal, all of these tainis yachadin, to begin with, is not the typical vow, even if you didn't say b'li neded. We'll see later on, there's a lot of leniencies regarding a tainis yachad. Shmuel says it has to be done dafka when you're davening. Shmuel Amar b'tfilas amincha. Amar Rabbi Yosef Kavos the Shmuel mistabra, because it says in Megillas Taanis, lahen kol inish. Therefore, regarding all of the fast days that were instituted during the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, that are called minor holidays, in meaning that you may not fast on those minor holidays. That if the Yesei Aloihi Mikadmas Dinom, that if a person took upon themselves a series of fast days, for whatever reason, and after the person took that upon himself, only then did Chazal say that on a certain date you may not fast. So they enacted the Yom Tov after I already took upon myself to fast. So the din is Yesar. Yesar means I need to prohibit, or I still should prohibit that eating on that day. I still have to keep my fast day. If first they enacted a Yom Tov and then I took upon myself to fast, so then my undertaking has no significance. If first I had the Kabbalah and only later did the Chazal Institute enact a Yom Tov, then I trump that enactment. But again, Yesar. Now, the word Yesar means that I have to prohibit eating upon myself. It's a very strong word. And l'chora, that means during davening. I mean, not during davening, David, is less significant. During davening makes that declaration like a more serious. Davening, you're talking to God. So Yesar means I should.
What about Bein Hashmashos, or those people who hold Rabbeinu Tam, for example, they daven in Chalet?
Well, if you're going to say that Bein Hashmashos, if Bein Hashmashos is a suffix, and this is a rabbinic undertaking, then you can be mekel. If you're going to understand that Bein Hashmashos has a din of a suffix, then it's too late Bein Hashmashos. It has to be prior. On the other hand, if you're davening mincha at that time, if you're davening mincha, then maybe you can be mekabel Taanis. Okay. So anyway, Yesed means that Yesed is mashma during the prayer. My love Yesed atzmai bitzulu. Saloisa. Tzulu means during davening. So he says, no, lav dafke. Loi. Yeyosed atzmai, you should undertake. You should make a Kabbalah. You don't lose that fast day because there is a communal minor Yom Tov, because you took upon yourself to fast prior to the Chazal imposing the minor Yom Tov. So, but you don't have to do it during davening. And this machlokes we already have also pliga baha Rab Chia v'Rab Shimon b'Rivi. Chad Omar Yesar. Yesar means again like Shmuel that dafke b'tfilas mincha, and v'Chad Omar Ye'aser. Ye'aser means that the words is two different versions of what the words were written over there. Megillas Taanis. Ye'aser means that you are already prohibited since you took upon yourself to fast a series of bahabs, and only later that Chazal say, "Oh, this day will become a Yom Tov." You're still prohibited in eating. Mando Amar Yesar Kid Amrinon, that you have to accept the fast during Mincha. So Mashma. Mando Amar Ye'aser Mahim the Tanya the Megillas Taanis. Koil Inish the Yesei Alohi Mikadmas Denam. Anyone who already took upon themselves to fast a series of fast days prior to the Chachamim designating a certain day as a Yom Tov, Ye'aser. Ye'aser means he's already prohibited. Ketzad, for example, let's listen to this version. Yachad shekibul olav sheni v'chamishi, and v'sheni shokol hashana kol. And later v'idu bam yomim toivim aksu Megillas Taanis. Sometime after a guy is fasting forever, every Monday and Thursday, he's fasting. And at some point, Chazal said on a certain date, which this year turns out to be either a Monday or on Thursday, it's a Yom Tov. So im nidroi koidem l'gzeiro seinu, if his vow was prior to our decree to celebrate the Yom Tov, then yevatel nidroi es gzeiro seinu. Yevatel means, by the way, yevatel, Rashi writes, yevatel means that he has to fast. Doesn't necessarily mean like Shmuel by undertaking a vow during davening. No. You always have to be mekabel Taanis mincha before, but it can mean l'shmuel during davening, l'rav shaloi b'shas tefillah. But the im gzeirosenu kodamas l'nidroi. But if our decree that a certain date has to be celebrated, like Hanukkah was a Megillas Taanis. The person says, "I'm fasting every Monday and Thursday." It's never going to include Hanukkah. Tevatal gzeirosenu es nidroi. Bottom line is that the machlokes stands between Rav and Shmuel. We paskin like Shmuel, that it has to be dafka during Mincha, which is an anomaly. Normally, Hilchasa Kerav Isura and Shmuel b'Mamoina, but Azoy Sveiter Tan Rabban. Okay, let's go back to the night preceding the fast. A person is mekabel Taanis. Now, obviously, if someone specified then you follow the specification. But if a person says, tomorrow I'm fasting, and you're like, David, very good. It's before let's go before Ben Hashmashas. It's the previous day. So tomorrow, what does tomorrow mean by a Yid? For many dinim, the day begins with night. So what's the base of the fast? If I say tomorrow, I'm going to fast. Okay, what does tomorrow mean by default? Unless I specified otherwise. Divrei Rebbe, till the break of dawn. However, Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon Omer, a much earlier time, and Rashi reminds us from Yuma Daf Chaf Aleph. It's very important. The Gemara over there speaks about there's the first calling of the rooster, there's the second calling of the rooster. It can mean even by the first calling of the rooster, which is a time way before Amud HaShachar. Says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, let's go back to the beginning, based on the premise that unless I specify differently, if I say tomorrow I'm fasting, it only means from Alois, that means that I'm eating at night, I'm up at night, I never finished my meal, so I can eat until Alois. But if I had a meal the night prior and I benched, and I didn't say that I'm still leaving the option for myself to eat, I didn't say that. I benched, Aval Gomer Su'udasa, you can no longer eat, even though it's not yet Amud HaShachar. That's version number one. Esvei, again, if Abaye is the one that made the statement, so Rav is the one that's challenging him. It says in Abraisa, Gomar v'Amad, even if you finished eating, if it's not yet Amud HaShachar, you can still eat. Clearly, you can still eat. So answers Abaye, Hassan Kishalei Silek, the table was not removed. As we know, that they used to have little tables for every individual. But once you finished eating and the tables were removed, according to this version, even though it's not Amud HaShachar, you may no longer eat. But let me add, unless when you benched, you said, I'm benching, but I want to leave the option open if I want to eat before Alois. Another version. When are you allowed to eat until Amud HaShachar? You said, okay, it only means Alois, even though you didn't say that. But that's only if you didn't go to sleep. But the moment you went to sleep, even if you wake up before Alois, or if you wake up before the Kreis HaGever, whatever earlier hour that is, then you may no longer eat. And by the way, again here also, and it's good to remember this, that before all of our fast days that we have in Shulchan Aruch, that begins by Alois, it's better before you go to sleep to say that if I'm going to wake up before Alois, I'm going to allow myself to eat. It's better to specify that. Again, it says in Abraisa, Yoshin ba'amid, still at Eza Oichel. No, sleeping doesn't cut it off. Even if you slept, even if you didn't say anything, if you wake up before Alois, you can eat. So answers the Gemara over there. That's only if a person was misnamneim, a person was only dozing off, a person wasn't actually sleeping. We have this so many times already together, as we'll have soon in Megillah. What's called misnamneim? Omar Ravashi, Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis. This is very meaningful. Nim v'loy nim, sleeping but not sleeping. Tir v'loy tir, awake but not awake. What does that mean? If you call out to the person, he's right away going to respond. But depends what you're asking him. If you ask him, hey, can you explain something to me? And he has to give you his own innovated under explanations. He's not sharp enough. He's not awake enough to give you svaras. But if you tell a person, was that svara a good svara? Did you hear that way of thinking? Once he hears something, he'll be able to properly authenticate it. That's pshat nisnamne. And again, Chavra, we paskin that at least it's better before you go to sleep night prior to a fast to say that I am going to eat before Alois, or if I wake up, I'll eat before Alois. There's also many other pratim in Shulchan Aruch, whether you can have a proper meal, whether you can only have a snack. Okay, but you have this concept of beginning only with Alois. Now, Omar Rav Kahanon, Yochid Shekibel all of Taanis. This is so important. Again, we're going to begin explaining. So like this: if a Yochid says, I'm mekabel a Taanis Yochid, at least he clarified what type of fast. Or if a Yochid says, I'm mekabel on myself to fast like a Taanis Tzibur, that's also a further clarification. If he didn't say none of the above, he said, like we had an Amud Aleph, l'machar ehye b'Taanis. So what did he mean? So Rav Kahana says, since he did not clarify what he meant, and there are certain public fast days which prohibit you wearing shoes, asur b'ne'ilas hasandal. And by the way, according to many of the Shainim, it doesn't only mean you can't wear leather shoes. It means all of the other inuyim. You can't bathe, you can't anoint yourself, tashma shamita, all of that is included. Why? Even though he never specified, but you got to be machmer. If the person would have said befedish, I'm a kabel tainis yachid, then there's clear, only not eating and drinking, and only from alois. If a person said, I'm a kabel tainis tzibur, guys, we learned this. Not all of these public fast days included a prohibition in all of the inuyim. The Mishnah that we learned on Daf Yud, which are the first three Taanis tzibur, also doesn't prohibit you yet to wear shoes, leather shoes. But there's going to be a second series of 3 fast days. So even in Taanis tzibur, it's not that every Taanis tzibur for the rain came with an isur of wearing leather shoes, but some of them did. Some of them did. So he holds that you have to be machmer, and it's like almost like a double chumrah. He didn't say, so let's say he meant Taanis tzibur, and maybe it meant the type of Taanis tzibur where you can't wear leather shoes. Now, heichi, levid, so what's the better way for you to take upon yourself a fast, not to leave things vague? So, Amar Rabba Barav Shila. Now, this is beyond what Shmuel said. Lema he agrees with Shmuel that a fast, you have to do a Kabbalah. Everyone agrees to that. You have to make a Kabbalah the day prior. Even if the fast only begins in the morning, you got to do it the day prior. But what should you say? That lemachar eye lefanecha. Lefanecha means to you, God, b'tainis yachid. Once you say tainis yachid, there isn't a tainis yachid that prohibits all of the inuyim. A tainis yachid only means you can't eat and drink. So now at least you clarified. Omar later.
I don't understand this. If a tainis yachid inherently doesn't include inuyim, why does he have to verbalize that? If he's doing a tainis yachid, it's a tainis yachid.
No, because he's accepting upon himself something beyond the letter of the law. A person could accept upon oneself. A person is allowed to say that. It's not called a tainis tzibur, but he means he's bound by the rules of certain public fastings. We see sometimes that the chachamim during a fast day, the mesaime masnayu, that they wear their leather shoes, and va'asul lebeit tanisa, and they come into the Beis Medrash during a communal fast day. In other words, why are you presuming that if it's a tainis tzibur, you may not wear your shoes? In Babel, there were times that they made a takana, they made a gzeda. Tomorrow, everyone has to fast, and everyone came with shoes. Even by a tainis tzibur, people wore their shoes. So when Absheshus heard that, he was very upset with that, and he says, well, maybe they're even eating. In other words, Absheshus really held that any type of tainis tzibur automatically demands for you not to wear your shoes. Now, this is very important, and we're learning it here for the first time. And here's the thing: Shmuel made a statement, and we're going to have him quoted later also. Shmuel says, "Ein tainis tzibur bebavel." There is no such a thing as a bona fide tainis tzibur. Now, that doesn't mean bavel. Doesn't mean bavel. Bavel means chutz la'aretz. A few things. First of all, as we also learned last week in the Agadata, that Bavel did not need rain as much as they needed in Eretz Yisrael. Some Rishonim limit this statement only fasting related to rain. That in Goyla, since they didn't need, Goyla also, according to some Rishonim, only means Bavel. Since they did not need that much rain, so if there was a lack of rain, it was never such a serious tzara. So even when the Beis Din in Bavel decided to impose on the community a communal fast day or series of fast days, Bahab, they were never bound by all of the strict the halachas in all of the inuyim. They were always allowed to wear their shoes. Other Rishonim understand Shmuel's statement to be a lot broader. Goyla doesn't mean Bavel. Goyla means diaspora anywhere out of Eretz Yisrael. And even if, God forbid, there is the worst tzara, and the Chachamim at the time decide we are declaring a communal fast day, the Rabbanon of Eretz Yisrael have a lot more power by the fact that they are living in Eretz Yisrael. And when they impose a fast day, it's called a tainis tzibur. When the Chachamim in Goyla declare a communal fast day, it's really never a communal fast day. It's many individuals fasting at the same time. And a Taanis Yachid doesn't come with an isur of wearing leather shoes. And that's the understanding of Shmuel, the way we'll understand it, that it's even when a Beis Din here, and all of the Chachamim today, if it would come to that point, say, Chevra, you have to be Mekabel Taanis. There were even by us and Hasidim, by the Rebbe, I remember the Rebbe once making a part-day fast, asking people to make a part-day fast. What happens there is that everyone mincha prior should say l'machar hayeh b'tainis, and even though everyone is doing it, it doesn't have the status of a tainis tzibur. It's again many yechidim doing it at the same time, but that is Shmuel. So there's really a machloikas throughout between Amoraim whether we agree with Shmuel, whether we don't agree with Shmuel. So Rav Sheish is.
But Rabbi, it seems like even Asar B'Tevis or Shivas B'Tammuz, according to Shmuel, would be not really a Taanis Tzibur.
Well, I would argue regarding the fast days that we have in Shulchan Aruch that it was not given to us by the Rabbanan in Goyla. It was given to us by the Rabbanan in Eretz Yisrael. It's different.
No, but then we would have to do the Inuyim, and we don't.
Correct.
So he's saying it's like a Taanis Yachid.
We learned that. We just learned that. We learned this in the last Masechta. We learned this in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, and there were taka times, there were taka people that fasted those days for 25 hours. It used to be, it depended how bad of a situation are the Jews in Galus. And when there was a lot of religious persecution, then those fast days were fasted for 25 hours, and many people did not wear shoes. Even today in Shulchan Aruch, there are certain people that at least during the Shivas of Tammuz daytime hours, they're noig the other inuyim. You have all these dinim brought down and a chanami. But just to be aware that there's a statement of Shmuel that ein taanis tzibur bebavel, and not everyone agreed with him. So that's the back and forth. So Rav Sheish was upset, and the other Chachamim didn't agreed with Shmuel that in Bavel there's no such a thing as a taanis tzibur. Right? Abaye v'Rava. The beauty of today's daf is that what's becoming clear is that there are many levels of fast days. I think that's the bigger message. Like you see, even a taanis tzibur, you have a taanis tzibur of Eretz Yisrael, there's a taanis tzibur of Goyla. You have the first 3 fast days of a taanis tzibur, then you have the second series of the 3. Then you have a taanis yachid, then you have a taanis sho'os. Abaye v'Rava, ma'ayli ki mesayme yapando. Abaye and Rava, they made it like a pshara. That means that they did not say that in Goyla, they lived in Bavel, that you may not wear shoes. But they knew that many people held that you may not wear leather shoes. So what did they do is that they only wore the upper part of the shoes. Or they only had leather in their upper parts of their shoes. And maybe underneath they had something inferior. So they had some sort of abstinence, but it wasn't a full-fledged not wearing leather shoes. Similarly, the way they dealt with this machloikis is that they would put on the right shoe on the left foot and vice versa. So they would wear leather shoes, but it was switched. They didn't have the types of arch shoes that we have, because that mistama is even worse than wearing the rag shoes. It was a very little inconvenience, like when you go to oil shoes. If you put the right and the left foot, I don't know, you won't even notice it. They just made a shinoi. And Abana the Beit Ravashi, nafeki chayu. They wore normal shoes. They didn't have any. They didn't restrict themselves in Goyla, even when everyone was fasting. That's the point. Even if in that locale, the Beis Din said, "Chevra, tomorrow we're fasting." They never understood that to mean anything other than abstinence from food and drink alone. Because Saber ki hada Amar Shmuel ain't taanis tzibur bebavel. Elo Tisha B'Av bilvad. Very good. Oh, Danny, let's go for Elo Tisha B'Av bilvad. Here, that's the liner. Taka, to tell you that even, the point is, according to Shmuel, even Shivas B'Tammuz, even the other fast days that began in Eretz Yisrael after the Churban, Bagoyla, you don't fast that series. Right. Amar Rav Huna, the final dinner, which will help us appreciate fast days. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Wow, a person who accepted to fast. Now again, there's so many ways of learning the statement. The Rosh says, if a person said regarding a day, not I'm taking upon myself 10 fast days. That's for sure. If I took upon myself 10 fast days, and during any one of these 10, I'm feeling weak during the day, so I can break my fast, but I have to pay it back. That's for sure. There's no chiddush in that. The chiddush is that I undertook today to be my fast day. Now, normally, if I make a vow, I got to keep my vow. If I want to get out of it, I have to do ataras nadarim. Not when it comes to Taanis yachid. It's never as serious as a normal vow. So if I'm in the middle of the day and I feel weak, I have to fast a day, but it doesn't have to be 2 days. I can break my fast and I can pay it back later. He said, of course, why did you even have to say that? But what is it? Is it like a vow that he must fulfill the way he said it? Pshita, it's not like a normal neder. The whole idea of a taanis yachid is you want to bring a certain amount of affliction upon yourself. And by the way, you're going to have to fast for a day, but it doesn't have to be today, even though you said l'machar. Imatzi mitzayir nafshe is good, and iloi matzi mitzayir nafshe is good. As long as you pay it back, Again, where do we find such a thing in halacha? The Torah is so careful. I have to keep the word that I say. The example that they give is when a person takes money and they say, this is for tzedakah. This money is for tzedakah. You don't have to give those dollar bills to tzedakah. You can give the same value of another dollar bill to tzedakah. That's the comparison, even though you said l'machar. Now, this is one way of learning the Gemara. Another version, same din, loiva adam tanisoy pareya. The whole idea of a taanis yachid, this is not a taanis sibur, this is a taanis yachid. When I'm saying by mincha, let's go with Shmuel, by tefillas mincha, l'machar eye b'taanis, or l'machar eye b'taanis yachid, even though I said l'machar, if during the machar I can't do it, I can break it and I can push it off to another time. And ki amrit chamei de Shmuel, amali pshita, lo yeh ela neder. And even by a neder, mi loy matzi, right? Can he not repay a vow? You can't repay a vow. The neder means a vow of giving tzedakah. That's what the Rishonim say. You can for sure pay it back anytime that's convenient for you. Now, based on this concept that every taanis yachid can be easily broken as long as you pay it back, so what did we learn in Amud Aleph? That Rabbi Yechanan, to get out of going to, he didn't want to be invited by the Beit Nasiya. So he would say, I'm in a fast. But now you know that you can break your fast. That's exactly what happened. So Rabbi Shubba Ravidi once visited the household of Ravasi. And Ravasi, for his guest, made him this egla tilsa. We have two understandings always. Either egla tilsa means that the cow gave birth for the third time, and that third child is like the best child. For all of you who are the third child of your mothers, you're like the greatest sibling. Or igla tilsa means that a calf that's only grown a third to its size, that's the tastiest calf. And he made a delicacy. He made a ribeye, an aged ribeye. So the host tells his guest, Litamar midi, esapis. So the guest, Rabbi Yeshua says, B'tanisa yasivna, I'm in a fast. Now you got a problem. So Amar lei, hold on. So what? Break your fast and pay back tomorrow. Loiva adam, you can discount it now and repay it later. The lois of marva liflam. So his counter was, there's one exception, that I'm fasting a taanis cholam. I had a frightening dream, and I am fasting as a means of, even if the meaning of the dream is negative, not good, I'm gonna channel the not good by me fasting for a day. That's the not good, and that I'll be yoitze with that. And therefore, and v'amar Rabba bar Machsya, bar Machasya, amar Rav Chama bar Guria, amar Rav, that yofa taanis l'chaloim ke'esh linoi eres, that just like if you have flax that is very flammable, so fire burns it all up, a fast will burn out, will take away all of the negativity of the dream. You're going to channel it, and with a vav. And Rav Chizda says, when does the fast have the power to resolve the bad dream? Only uboy bayoim. Uboy bayoim means mamish that day, which also means, my friends, you don't even have a Kabbalah Satainis. But such a fast, they cannot be paid back. If I'm going to eat now, then I'm not going to have a taanis cholam. So he got out of that invite. Now, V'amar Rabbi Yosef, speaking about this, you know how important it is to fast that day, even on Shabbos. If a person has a bad dream, what they think is a bad dream Friday night, and they feel they want to make a fast, you fast on Shabbos, because that's the only way the Taanis Cholim will be effective. But how can you fast on Shabbos? Now, even though you ate the Friday night meal, still, you have a mitzvah of Oinik Shabbos. You can't fast on Shabbos. So for that, Maita Kante, a Jewish answer, Lesef Tanisa Litanisa, that if you have to fast another time. You have to fast for a kapara for the fact that you fasted. Gavaldik.
But you do in fact fast on Shabbos.
You fast on Shabbos, and then you fast. The second fast is a fast that you can pay back. Moiridik. We're going to stop over here. At least we got up to the Mishnah, and God willing, a lot more to be continued.
Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead. Rabbi, when you mentioned about the halachas like Shmuel, I think it says here in the article that it showed that supported actually Rav, not Shmuel.
Why Shmuel says that you
says Tevatel Gzerasi is Nidroi, and he says in the article, he says that the Bryce is indicating that he does not have to accept the Dafke Menchal like Rav.
No. That was the answer the Gemara gave. No, that's later. The answer the Gemara gave is that you can't prove from Megillas Taanis like Shmuel because you can understand it according to Rav. Correct. We learned that way. I'm just, Danny, the Ein Nishmat and then Mitzvah. Let's go into the beginning. The letter Vav is on Tefillas Mincha. In the Rambam and in Tur and in Shulchan Aruch, we are Mekabel Taanis only by Tefillas Mincha. That's the way we paskin today.
But today, if we want to get up to eat, we don't see you have. You be Mekabel the Taanis.
Mekabel Taanis.
Okay.
I'm coming, guys. I'm gonna get a little coffee. I'm coming right back. All right, let's go weiter. It's late. All right, let's go, Chevra. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Taanis Daf Yud Gimel. We left off on Daf Yud Beis, Amid Beis, by the Mishnah. The Mishnah is at the end of the second medium line, more or less the middle of the Amid. We are going to continue, firstly, the series of fast days that we have when there is a lack of rain in Eretz Yisrael. So we have the Taanis of the Yechidim that we spoke about. Then we have the first set of Bahab, or the first series of Taanis Tzibur, which were as lenient as the Taanis Yachid, as we had it in the Mishnah on Daf Yud, that you can eat and drink the night prior. The fast only begins during the day. Even during the day, there are no prohibitions of work. You have none of the other afflictions, none of the other enuim other than eating and drinking. And now the Mishnah will continue to tell what happened if it still didn't rain, how in the second series of 3 fast days, the fast becomes more stringent, And then we're going to learn that if still Hashem did not respond to our prayers by giving us rain in the Holy Land, then there would be another 7, not series of, but another 7 fast days. So it's 3, 3, and 7. As we'll speak out, there's going to be a total of 13 fast days. What happens if it still doesn't rain? All of these details we will have in the Mishnah. Now, the big topic that we're going to have on Taanis Daf Yud Gimel is the following. We're going to focus on the prohibition of washing oneself. Now, we are learning the sugya of communal fast days or public fast days. One may not wash oneself. Does that mean you may not wash yourself, not even in cold water? Or does it mean you only may not wash yourself in hot water? So we're going to have a machlokes between Rav Chizda and, according to one version, and Rava. Another version says they both say the same thing, but Rav Chizda is going to say that on public fast days, you are allowed to wash your body in cold water. The issur is only to take a bath in hot water. However, says Rav Chizda, but if a person is mourning, a person in Avelus, or the fast days connected to Avelus, not connected to rain, but connected to Avelus, there you may not wash your body in cold water, not even bathing in cold water. Many challenges against Rav Chizda. One version is that Rava will hold that a mourner is allowed to wash his body in cold water. We're going to learn other dinim of Avelus here on Daf Yud Gimel, even though the main sugyas of mourning is in Moed Katan, and then we're going to come back to the fast days, and we're going to have a machlokes as to the Tefilla connected to a fast day, which we call as the Tefilla of Anenu. Where exactly is it said in the Shemona Esrei? The two big options is either it's a bracha for itself, or it's inserted in Shema Koilenu, but it doesn't create its own standalone bracha, and much, much more. Again, let's begin. Chevron Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis by the Mishnah. The end of the second, the beginning of the third medium-sized line. Says the Holy Mishnah. Avru elu v'lo inenu. The Yechidim fasted, it didn't help. The first 3 fast days that begin after the Chodesh Kislev came and went, following all of the rules of Daf Yud, and we were not yet answered. So now, Beis Din, Goizdin, Gimel, Kaini, Yoisach, Chedes, Ala Tzibur, there was another, what we will call the middle series of fast. We're not even counting the Yechidim. The first is the first 3 Bahab of Daf Yud. Now this is the next 3. Here, here you can only eat and drink before Shkia. Not the way we had the first 3, that the fast only begins from the morning. Here, the fast already begins at night. Right? In the last Mishnah, we learned you can still eat and drink when it's dark. Not on this. Number 2, during the day, you may not work. And also now comes all of the inuyim. You may not bathe. That's isur berechitza. You may not anoint yourself. You may not wear leather shoes. You may not have marital relations. And on top of that, they would lock the bathhouses in the city. We're going to learn some nuance. Well, if you can't bathe, what do you have to write in the Mishnah? You would lock the bathhouses. That will be really the underlying of Chizda Rava, whether you can bathe in cold water or not, as we'll see. Now, so it's already 6 public fast days came and went, and there isn't rain yet in the Holy Land. So now, Beis Din goes in Aliyah, Beis Din makes a gezerah on the community. Oid Sheva, not another 3 sets of Bahab, another 7 fast days, another 7 days, which means there's a total of Yud Gimel Tiny Salat Tzibur. Minyana, why does the Mishnah have to give a number? We know how to count. 3 and 3 and 7 is 13, because they really correspond to the Yud Gimel Midos Arachim. There's something about number 13. Now, are these 7 fast days even more stringent than the prior? Says the Mishnah, yeah. That Harei Elu, the final 7, are Yoseros al Harishonis. They are even more, there are more details, more than even the medium 3. Shebe'elu, in the final 7, Masriyan, we cry out. We're going to learn in the Gemara, what does crying out mean? Either it means that there is a longer version of Anenu, or it means we blow the shofar. Let's sleep, we cry out, and the stores are closed down. Another that also will have to be clarified. Is it that, I mean, the Mishnah already said before that asurin b'malacha. What exactly is closed down? We'll leave that for the Gemara. Even though the stores are closed down, even though, guys, all of these 7 fast days, I'm happy, is Bahab. It's not one day after the other. The 7 fast days means Monday, Thursday, until you hit number 7. People have to break their fast. If you're shutting down the stores, how are people going to buy food? So we differentiate between what's done on Monday and what's done on Thursday. On Monday, since you're only buying food to break your fast, there isn't the additional need to buy food, L'kavet Shabbos. So matin im chashecha. The words matin means that the store, if you know stores the way it used to be, you had these big shutters. The whole Brazil goes like that. So you open it up a little bit. You partially open up the doors towards the end of the evening. So, and not all businesses, but stores that sell food, so people can buy food. But Ubachamishi, on Thursday, they didn't partially open the stores, and they didn't open it only towards the evening, but the food stores were kept open on Thursdays, because you have to not only buy food to break the fast for Thursday night, but you also are already buying food for Shabbos Kodesh. Now, what happens if there's still no rain? So here, a general prohibition was put on the community. Not fast days. No more fast days. At least no obligatory fast days. But mematin, b'masa ubamatin, there is a diminution in commerce. There's a lot that is discussed. Exactly what does that mean? How do you quantify that? How do you qualify it? The next line is the binyan ubenatiyah, that you have to diminish building and planting. The Gemara adds building and planting that are connected to joy. The building and planting for people that are in the construction business, then if there's a hefsid meruba, we'll leave this later for the Gemara. It's very vague in the Mishnah. There's a certain diminution generally in working, in joyous planting and in joyous building. We don't get engaged or married. Wow, that's a big thing. During that season, there's no erusin and no nesuyin. Not only that, people don't even properly greet each other. So when you see each other, mamish the way it is, if someone was put in a chedim, so the people don't properly greet each other. And we interpret the lack of rain as if Hashem is excommunicating us on a certain level, Rahman al-Islam, and we react accordingly by not greeting each other the way we normally do. Now, even though that after the total of the 13, other than these restrictions, there isn't any obligatory fast days, just like these distinguished individuals. They already began fasting after Yud Zayin and Mar Cheshvan. They also continue to fast. They fast until the end of Nisan. Again, this is not our calendar month of Nisan, but 30 days after the vernal equinox. They only keep on fasting, not every day. Monday, Thursday, Monday, Thursday, Monday, Thursday, where if it would rain, there is some benefit. Once you are already entering the spring season, or you're already in the spring season to a point where rain in the Holy Land is of no benefit, then there's no point fasting. Yatsa Nisan, the Yardug Shamim, if rain falls after 30 days after the vernal equinox, then in Eretz Yisrael, it's called a klala. The rain itself is considered something negative, like we have it if it rains on Sukkos. There isn't any benefit from those waters. Shenemar, as it says a pasuk, that halok tzir chitim hayoim, and if it rains on ketzir chitim, it's only a klala. Raining after this Nisan of the Mishnah is considered a klala, and therefore there's no point in even for the yechidim to continue to fast. Okay, says the Gemara, when we speak about inuyim, so we know that we learned that in Yuma. So you can't eat, you can't drink, you can't bathe, you can't anoint, can't wear leather shoes, you can't have marital relations. Fine, that's called an inuy. You can't work, not working. All the other inuyim, isbuhu tainug. There is pleasure in eating, there's pleasure in drinking, there's pleasure in bathing, there's pleasure in anointing, etc. But rechitza, there's rechitza v'sichvat hashamita meila zaser. Abel malacha, going to work itself puts you under stress. If the goal is to be in a stressful place, they should prohibit work. They should demand of you to work. How great is that? Many people with large families have more tsar taka when they can't go to work. But the Gemara does not go based on that premise. So Amar Rabbi Chiza, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, Amar Kroah. It says in a pasuk in Yoel, Kachut Soim, prepare a fast, and Karu Atzaram, and call a gathering. And Isfu Zekanim, in other words, we are considering these fast days as a day in which you are being mekadosh it as a fast. You are calling an atzara, and you are bringing together the elders. So since we compare it to an atzeres, atzeres is another word that's used regarding Yom Tif. Atzeres also b'siyas malacha, Taanis also b'siyas malacha. You're right, it's not a svara. Misvara, demanding work would bring more tzara. But the pasuk considers it a Yom Tif in the context of you can't do work. Hold on, if it's like atzeres, ima atzeres, and all of the biblical Yom Tovim, the isur of working begins from the night prior. Af Taanis, the isur of malacha should be the night prior. So Amar Rab Zera, good question, but I have a great answer. In that same verse, it says isfu zekanim. Sifa zekanim. When do the elders gather? So they would gather the elders on fast days. They would only gather, we'll see soon why they gathered, but the elders would gather, they only do that during the day. So the reason why the Torah also says Isfu Zekanim, a pasuk in Yoel, is to tell you that Af Tzoim Nami Bayoim, which means that the prohibition of work is only during the daytime hours. Now let's go further. Normally, the elders would gather towards the afternoon. So the Ema Mitihara, so the Isur Malacha should only be in the afternoon. 3 lines from the bottom. That's a proof to that which Rav Huna taught us. The Amar Rav Huna says that the elders on these fast days would already gather during the morning. That mitzafra kinufiam. And hechi of the, what did they do? They gathered for what? What happened during these fast days, during these final 7 fast days? And all the elders gathered for what? Amanabai. Mitzafra for the first half of the day, ma'ayninon b'mila demasa. They make some sort of collective counting. They scrutinize the affairs of the city. They see if there's something on a communal level that we have to better ourselves in. They make a collective cheshbon hanefesh, and they do that dafka in the first half of the day. Now for the second half of the day, they divide that into 2. That riva, the yoima, the third quarter of the day, it was the first half of the afternoon. That is where Koren and Besifra, they read from a Sefer Torah, and they read half Torah. They do Torah learning. For the final quarter of the day, that is where they daven. The biggest koyach to daven on a fast day is dafka during the end of the fast day. We ask Hashem for mercy. As it says that vayokumu alamdam, that they stood in their place. Vayikru b'sefer Torah Hashem Elokehem, and they read from the Torah, and that is Revi'as Hayom. And we know we are saying it means the third quarter in the day. And then Urevius, which would mean the final quarter, Misvadim, we confessed, Umishtachvim Lashem Elokehem, and we bow down to God, which means that we were asking Hashem for Rachamim. Daf Yud Gimel asks the Gemara, that pasuk that you just quoted didn't say which quarter, it said a quarter and a quarter. Maybe the first half of the day was learning Torah, reading half Torah, and asking for Rachamim. Maybe the afternoon was when they made this collective accounting, communal accounting. Don't think that. Because it says, a pasuk in Ezra, that the Elyahu osvu kol chared b'divrei Elokim chayim, that to me gathered all those, right, who are charedim, right, they are swift in following the words of God. Al ma'al hagoyla, concerning the transgressions of the exile. In other words, there was a certain gathering which they were contemplating on certain betterments that need to happen on a communal level. And it says, and during the afternoon, I stood up during my fast, and I lifted up my hands to Hashem. Clearly that the davening, the tefillah, the rachmim is always done in the afternoon. And indeed, that's a whole another theme on a beautiful topic that we call the afternoon of Shabbos, Raiva, Diraivan. Like we mentioned in the intro to last daf Yud Beis, that we do that in the Elos dafka towards the end, that it's accumulative, and the closer you get to the end of the fast, the greater of an Eis Ratzin it is. And when there is an Eis Ratzin above, that's when you use it out for tefillah. 4 lines from the top of the Amid. Amar Afram bar Papa Amar Rab Chizda. Here we go. This is the big topic of Daf Yud Gimel. Kol shuhu mishum evel. Anything, right, that's connected to mourning, either someone who, God forbid, is sitting Shiva, a mourner, or a fast day that's connected to mourning. Now, make no mistake, the lack of rain is a big tzara, but it's not mourning. It's different. It's because of a communal distress, but not related to a passing of someone. Something that's connected to Avelus, either a novel or a fast day like Tisha B'Av, right? Tisha B'Av ve'avel. Oh, there says Rab Chizda, Asur bein b'cham and bein b'tzayin. And there we're focusing on the prohibition of rechitza. We can't bathe. We're speaking not about a shower. We're speaking about a bath, soaking in water. There, it's the highest level of Isur. You can't even bathe in cold water. But kol shuhu mishum tainug, but any public fast day that is imposed on the community, that we should abstain from pleasure, we abstain from pleasure, but there's no avelos to going like any kind of tzibur, b'cham and asur. The Mishnah says in the second series of 3, you can't have rechitza. It only means you can't bathe in hot water. About bitzayin and mutar. So Rab Chizda is really saying 2 statements. Both are going to be challenged, but he's going to stand strong for both. Number 1, he's saying that an avel or a fast day of avelos is so powerful that you can't even bathe in cold water. Second statement of Rab Chizda, that a Taanis tzibur taka prohibits rechitza, but only bathing in hot water. Amar Rav Idi bar Avin af anon nami tanina. First, we're going to try to prove that Rab Chizda is right regarding his second rule, that by a Taanis tzibur, mishum tainu, the isur is only bechamen. It says in our Mishnah that they would close down the bathhouses. Now, why did the Mishnah have to write that? Guys, bathhouses are hot. Bathhouses, you have rivers there. Bathhouses, that is what they would close down. Amalei Abaya, what kind of proof is that? Just because the Mishnah says they would close down the bathhouses, I'm going to tell you that even if it's a fast day for Tainug, you may not even bathe in cold water, maybe. But what option does the city have? But they should close down the river. You can't close down a river. The only thing you can close down is a bathhouse. Maybe Tzainin is also awesome. But what should the Mishnah write? That they stop up the rivers, that they get rid of the waters of the rivers. You can't do that. So there's no proof from the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, yes, there is. No. My father, meaning Ravida, explained the proof from the Mishnah that we just quoted, from our Mishnah, Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis. Hachi kashelei. If you don't agree with Rab Chizda, if you were to hold that the Taanis tzibur demands abstinence even from a cold bath, michti tanan also berechitza, the Mishnah already wrote you can't bathe. Why did the Mishnah have to write that you close down the bathhouses? What is it adding? It's not adding anything. That's the Gavaldik. But the Mishnah is being meramez. No. The type of Isur is only for hot. So the bathhouses were closed down. That's what it means. Elolav shmamino take b'chamen asur, but b'tzoinin mutter. Now, lema misayele. Okay, so that's good. So one thing is clear, that during these communal fast days, guys, we learned in last daf, and we'll learn it again, that Shmuel holds that bagoila it's not shayach a Taanis tzibur. Even if your local rabbinate says we got to make a city-wide fast day, never has the status of a Taanis tzibur. But even if it would have a status of a Taanis tzibur, at least we already proved the first part, the second statement of Rab Chizda, that you can bathe in cold water. But now we're going to go to the first statement of Rab Chizda. And no one should ever know about Avelus, but that's very negeya to Avelim. So Rab Chizda made a very strong statement that both a mourner, an avel, God forbid, or the fast days that are connected to the morning of the Churban, there the Isur of bathing is so strong, not b'chamen, not even b'tzvainin. So now maybe let's substantiate the first ruling of Rab Chizda that says in a Braisa, Kol Chayavei Tefilla is people that are obligated to go to the mikvah. We're speaking at times where people were able to live in a state of tahara, and if they became tamei, then you got to go to the mikvah. Remember with that whole question whether tefillah bismana mitzvah here or not. So this brisa holds that it's important for you to get out of your state of tuma ASAP. And even if the first opportunity is on Tisha B'Av, the first opportunity is on Yom Kippur, toivlin kedarkum, be'be Tisha B'Av, be'be Yom Kippur. You go to the mikvah. By the way, we don't do that nowadays, but let's go to what it says in the brisa. Now asks the Gemara, hold on, what type of mikvah are we talking about? They're speaking about a hot mikvah. They had no hot mikvahs then. Tefilla b'chamin mi'ika. How can you have a hot mikvah? You have to gather the waters in a place. That's mayim she'uven. It invalidates the mikvah. The waters of the mikvah have to collect naturally. Now, a lot changed since. Now we have kosher mikvahs that are not mayim she'uven, that are hot, but that's over the last few hundred years. Prior to that, the mikvah wasn't a river. Now, Tosfos points out, I know it's late, but I just want to speak out something very important, that the mikvah that we're building over here, like all the mikvahs, there's something called hamshacha. Hamshacha means that if you have halachic gathered waters, but they don't go straight into the mikvah, they go out of the pipe, but they travel on the ground for a certain small distance, and then they flow into the mikvah hole. That's called hamshacha, flowing over the ground. That according to some opinions, those waters lose their status of being gathered waters in a keli, and it creates a valid mikvah. So Tosfos proves from our Gemara, why is the Gemara saying that there is no such a thing as a hot mikvah? You can make hamshacha and then warm it up. If it's in a tub, warm up water, pour it over the ground, and it falls into the void of the mikvah, and you got yourself a hot mikvah. So Zaraya says Tosfos that you cannot fill up a whole mikvah with mayim using hamshacha, which is the challenge we have nowadays here in Los Angeles. It doesn't rain for many, many months. How do you get waters? So hamshacha is not hamshacha only means that the mayim she'uvin will not passel a kosher mikvah, but to create a mikvah through hamshacha you cannot do. Anyway, that's over here.
Sam, what about the whole hashaka thing that we do today, which they did for hundreds of years? In Masada, you see that they had hashaka. What's going on over here?
I don't know if they had hashaka in Masada. They waited for rainwaters. They went into the proper rainwater mikvah, and if it wouldn't have rained, then you would lose the water, and everyone used the same water. Okay, so anyways, here they didn't have hot mikvahs. So elalav, it must mean when the Brisa says you can go, it means in a cold mikvah. Elalav b'tzoinen. So that's an ayah that only because you're chayiv to go to the mikvah because you're tummy. And this is when we were able to keep the status of remaining pure. And because of tefillah, the bismana is a mitzvah, that's why you were allowed to go on Tisha B'Av. Which implies that another person, if it's not the first opportunity to have to get out of your state of tumah, then you may not go even to a cold mikvah. Is a raya that Avelus does not allow us to bathe, not even in cold water. Says, counters the Gemara, Amar Rav Chana, Barkatina loy. No, you know proof. Maybe the Brisa, speaking about Chamei Tiveria, they did have hot mikvahs, natural hot springs. And that is what's asur, and even that is allowed if it's Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, but you're able to go to the mikvah, you're chayiv to go to the mikvah. Says the Gemara, hold on. Let's continue to read that Brisa. Says in the Brisa, the Amar Rav Chaninas Kana Kehanim, he disagrees with you go to the mikvah on Tisha B'Av. Kedayu basically keinu la'abed all of tefillah achas, tefillah pamachas bashana. Come on, Chavra, Tisha B'Av, we're fasting for the Churban Abayis. Yeah. It's usher to go to the mikvah, he holds, even if you're chayiv to go to the mikvah. You can't go to the mikvah on Tisha B'Av. Now the problem is, according to the Amnat B'Tzoinon Mutar, right? I do have a proof. Because if you won't agree with Rab Chizda, if you will hold that an oval is allowed to bathe in cold water, there is a value of someone who's chayiv to become tahor, and they are able to, for them to become tahor ASAP, let them go in cold water. So why would Rab Chanina Sigana Ka'anim say, Cheva Tisha B'Av, forget about going to the mikvah, because we got to mourn. Hold on, we have a solution. So now we do have a proof. Is a raya that the Tanach holds you can't even go in cold water. Elamad, with the exception that on Tisha B'Av you could. For that, Rab Chanina says, no, you can't. So again, the Gemara says there's no proof. Amar Rav Papa, no. Maybe the Brisa is only speaking about a place where the only halachically kosher mikvah are hot springs. So if that's the only option, so Rab Chanina argues, and he says that Chayav Tefillah don't go to the mikvah on Tisha B'Av. Today, nowadays, just to say we're tummy anyways, a woman, let's say, going to the mikvah is not for her to become tahor, for her to touch Taanis. It's only to permit her to be with her husband. Anyways, she cannot be with her husband. We can't be together, not on the night of Tisha B'Av, not on the night of Yom Kippur. It's a whole different thing. Let's go back. Toshama, again, we're focusing on the first statement of Rab Chizda, that if someone who's in Avelus, or the fast days connected to Avelus, has such a strong isur rechitza that does not allow us not even to bathe in cold waters. Tashema, kishu asur b'malacha, on public fast days, that's what this Bryce is talking about. Lo yamru ela b'yoyim. It's only during the day that you may not work. Ava b'layla, but during the night you are allowed to work. Wow. And by the way, Rashi, 4 lines under the Gemara says that mehacha mashma, that even though people don't work on Tisha B'Av, certainly not until Chatzos Hayoim, but it's only during the daytime of the day. During the night going into Tisha B'Av, they can work. And then Rashi says, don't be mafars on this. But that's based on this Gemara. Furthermore, back in the Braisa, that on all public fast days, we're speaking about the second series. You can't wear leather shoes. It's only when you are in the city. But when you're walking around out, when you're going on the road, when you're traveling and there you needed to wear proper shoes, then you are allowed to wear it. So Hakait said, what do you do? Once you go out, when you depart on the road, on the highway, then you would put on your leather shoes. The moment you enter the city, you remove it. Further in the Brais, when we say that on the second series of public fast days, you may not bathe, it only means you may not bathe your entire body, which is taking a bath. But to put your face and your hands and your feet in water, then it is mutar. Continues the Braisa, here's the punch line. That if someone is excommunicated, that they also may not bathe, but they can wash padav yadav raglov. And the same thing is in a mourner. And my love that the menuda and the avol is also speaking about the isur of washing oneself, which is telling you that a avol may not wash his whole body, but he can wash his panav yadav raglov. Now, what type of water may he not bathe in? It doesn't mean that if we're speaking about hot water. So a mourner cannot bathe in hot water, but he can wash his hands and his face, hands and feet in hot water. That's not true. A mourner may not put his little pinky in hot water for pleasure. No, second narrow line, Avel Asur Lohoishid, even only Etzboi Bechamen. Elola B'Tzoinon. Clearly you see that even in, like Rab Chizda, that even B'Tzoinon, an Avel may not bathe in. He can wash his hands, he can wash his feet, but he can't take a bath. Gemara says, Loi, no, because Lo'olam, I'll tell you that this Bryce is only speaking about hot water. This line is only referring to the other prohibitions mentioned in this Braisa, which is working, which is wearing leather shoes, but it's not even talking about the Isur on an Avel. So it could be that an Avel is allowed to bathe in cold water, as one may in a Taanis Sigur. Toshema, this is going to be a kasha against Rab Chizda Shita regarding the mourner. You say Rab Chizda that an Avel may not bathe in cold water. To Amar Rab Abba HaKoyen, in the name of Rab Yosi HaKoyen, that Maiso Meisu Ban of Shal Rab Yosi Ben Rab Chanina, he lost, as we'll see, not one child but 2 children, and he bathed in cold water in Shiva. So how can you say that an Avel cannot bathe? So answers the Gemara, Hassan, Kishetekafu Avolov, that he lost a son, and before he finished Shiva from one son, he lost another son. So he had back-to-back 2 periods of Shiva. For such a person, we're lenient. How long can you go without bathing? The Tanya, as we learned, the general rule that tikafu avalov, that if someone has a series of avelus, 7-day shiva, one back to the other, zeh. So, for example, by the way, this is not only shiva. This goes to cutting the hair. So whether we don't cut the hair for shloishim, theoretically, for a father and a mother, no one should know we don't cut the hair for a year until someone shouts at you. So if someone already has long hair because they are in the middle of avelus, and then again they become a novel, But they're going to go around that long without cutting the hair. So if the hair becomes too heavy, then mekel betar, you can lighten up the hair with using a razor, which means with the shinoi you can take a haircut. And likewise, you can already start to launder your clothing. So we see with a shinoi, as we'll see. So we see that when that was the case of Rabbi Yossi ben Rab Chanina. Now, Amar Rab Chizda, the second to last line, that even though we are lenient by someone who has back-to-back periods of mourning, that's only betar, only with a razor, but not with misparayim, but not, you can't use a proper scissors. In other words, you have to cut your hair with a shinoi. Similarly, when you are allowed to launder your clothing, it's only b'mayim, only using water, but not with neted, not b'choil, natron, or they used to use sand to take out the dirt. You have to do it in an unusual way. At kan Rab Chizda. Okay. Now, the second statement of Rab Chizda, everyone subscribes to. The first statement of Rab Chizda, the chumrah, that an avel or a fast connected to avelus like Tisha B'Av, you cannot even bathe b'tzoinon. That Rab Chizda said. We're going to have a machloik, two versions if Rava disagreed. The first version is, Amar Rava, the last line, I disagree with you, Rab Chizda. A avel is allowed to bathe in tzoinon even during Shiva. We're lenient. The avel is like a Taanis tzibur. Yeah, you can't take a hot bath, but you can take a cold bath. And I have a proof. Just like an avel is allowed to eat meat, allowed to drink wine, when a person, God forbid, is in the state of aninus, there is where you can't have meat and drink wine. Right? Similar to the 9 days. But during the Shiva, by the way, we paskin that way. You can have meat and drink wine. So you see that we are not that chamur. You can take a cold bath. Meisvei, now we're going to challenge this version of Rava from the following Braisa. Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis. I hope we can get far into this. Now, the Braisa is speaking about a very interesting concept, that when a girl is of marriageable age, in the times of Chazal, so a minor did not get married, but when you become 12 years old, if the body began to mature, then she enters a phase called na'arus or a na'ara, and she's in that phase of like adolescent for 6 months, from 12 to 12 and a half. And once she's 12 and a half, she's called a fully matured young woman called a boigeres. And just understand the holach yelech, the culture, that a nara would get married, but there wasn't pressure. She was still young. Once a girl is a boigeres, that's already pressure for her to get married. She's already 12 and a half. My father always used to tell his children, no pressure, at least 6 months. He began telling it to us when we were 18. The Yiddish, you have to get married young. Fine. So if a girl is of age where she's in Shidduchim, and God forbid if she's sitting in mourning, we don't want her not to look attractive. So the Braisa says that she's not allowed to make herself unpresentable. She has to remain attractive, right, for potential suitors. Even if it's mourning for her father. What does that imply? That even a nara is again a girl that might get married, but there isn't the pressure because she's not 12 and a half yet. She's still young. There, if she wants, she doesn't have to get married. Hanaira, Risha. Risha means she's allowed to be unpresentable, but if she's allowed to be unpresentable, then she has to be unpresentable, which means she has to keep the laws of mourning. Now, what are we talking about? What will make her or not make her presentable or not? L'chayret speaking about the rechitza, about bathing. And now again, ubemai, what type of bathing? Right? If it's about hot water, are you telling me ein haboigeres risha, that a boigeres is not allowed to abstain from bathing in hot water? You're telling
Rasho.
Ein haboigeres rasha, which means, are you telling me that she has to bathe in hot water? Can't be. And we can't say that just because she's of marriageable age that she should be allowed to take a hot bath. It must mean that she's allowed to take a cold bath, which implies if you are not a boigeres, if you're not in shidduchim, then you may not take even a cold bath. That goes against this version of Rava. Answers the Gemara, no, that everyone can take a cold bath. What type of attractiveness you are allowed to remain attractive, you are not allowed to be unattractive? That's regarding kichol and pirkus. Kichol is that they would paint the eyelids with a blue color. Men also did it then, but that would make a person look beautiful. And pirkos means they would braid their hair, which also was what made them look more attractive instead of having their hair all wild. Now, first we did not refute Rava. Now, I'm going to bring an ayah to Rava. A lot of now is we had it on Amar Aleph. The Amar Rab Abba HaKoyin, in the name of Rabbi Yossi HaKoyin, that there was a tragic story that happened, that Umeisu Banov, that the sons in plural of Rabbi Yossi Bar Rab Chanina passed away, and he bathed in cold water all the 7 days. Araya that an oval can bathe in cold water. So it counters the Gemara, you don't have an ayah.
But same case, after another or the same time? How do we limit to Banav? On the same case we just before?
The same one we have.
Or one of them?
Both of us, the way it might mean Yakir during the second Shiva. It might mean that. If we go with Rava, he bathed like everyone else. Any oval can bathe in cold water. If you won't go with Rava, if you're going to go with Rab Chizda, then in Amri, they explained that Hassan, the reason why he was uniquely allowed to bathe was because B'Shem Te Kafuhu Aval of Zeh, it was back-to-back Avelus, and the Yakir, according to this, he only bathed during the second Shiva, because an oval may not bathe in cold water, but in this case, they opened it up. It's too long. The Tanya that the Kafu Aval of Zeh, so Hichbet Sa'are Mekel Betar. Another leniency that you can launder your clothing. And again, we have this on Amad Aleph. And Amar Abchizda Betar, even though you are allowed, but you can only lighten up your hair by using a razor, but not using scissors. In other words, you can only cut a hair with a shinoi. Bamayim, even though you can launder your clothing, it's only with water. Another detail. Ahal is another type of substance, the herb or plant that was used to properly launder clothing. There's an in-between. At Khan, the girsa, the version that Rava argued with Rab Chizda, and now Ikada Amri that Rava agrees with Rab Chizda. Amar Rava that Avel Asur B'Tzoinen Kol Shiva. What about meat and wine? Meat and wine, an oinen cannot partake in. But during the Shiva, you can have meat, you can have wine. So how can you tell me that this yeah and that not? So Rava will explain the reason why you could eat meat, why you are allowed to drink wine is because you are having it to ease your anxiety. They had no Xanax, they had no GABA, they had no Kava, they had wine. And it's interesting that not only wine takes away anxiety, but meat would also take away anxiety. I think we have in Ksubas that they would give a novel when he would come home, have 10 cups of wine, a bosom of wine to calm him down. But bathing, interestingly, bathing in hot water can also calm you down, but no one says that you can take a hot bath. A cold bath doesn't calm you down. Now we're going to have the same Gemara in the other direction. Now that Rava, according to the Ikeda Amri, is saying what Rab Chizda says, so let's bring a raya to Rava from the Braisa that we quoted on top of the Amr. It says, Ein haboigeres rasha'a shkoyach shleimah lenavel atzma, that she's not allowed to make herself unattractive. I mean, she has to be attractive, which implies that a na'ara, even though na'aras also got married, but they are allowed to, and therefore they are bound by all of the halachas of avelus. Now, what are we talking about? If we're speaking about bechamin, are you telling me ein haboigeres rasha'a, which means she's not allowed to make herself unattractive, which means she can take a hot bath? That can be. Even your finger you can't stick into hot water. Elama or boigeres can take a cold bath, which implies that a nara and everyone else cannot even take a cold bath. Answers the Gemara, no, because we're going to learn pshat. It's not a proof. So that's a proof. It's not a proof because maybe that's only referring to kichul and pirkus. That no, putting on makeup is something that a boigeres can do. Putting on makeup is something that a nara may not do. But as far as bathing, okay, you can go either way. Now let's go back to Amar Rab Chizda. Zois oimeres. Zois oimeres that an oval is not allowed to apply cosmetics other than the boigeres. Avel asur bitich boises kol shiva. A mourner is not allowed to launder their clothing because laundering clothing was also done to enhance your appearance. And therefore, anything that's appearance enhancing is asur on a mourner. The hilchasa avel asur lirchotz kol gufay. An avel is not allowed to bathe his body, not bechamim, not betzoinim kol shiva. Wow. Avel. You have to know how to read the. Don't get confused between an avel and an avel. This is but avel panav yadav raglov bechamin asur betzoinim mutar. Okay. Weiter. Aval, again, aval, however, lasuch, to anoint, afilu kol shu asur. But ve'im lahaveres azuama. But if you want to take away filth, then you are allowed. And we are lenient. When I say we, again, not all the we's, but if a person, God forbid, is in mourning and they're dirty, it's not about enhancing your appearance. Not bachamin, but to take a quick cold shower or lukewarm, not a hot shower, not a shower of tainug, but to remove filth. That is where you have a lot of room for leniency. Atkan, the sugya of avelus, and we should never know of it. And in the Chazal, we're going to come back to this by Moyed Katan. Now let's go back to Taanis. So what are we looking about? We're learning about fast days. Even when we began the sugya Chavra 3 daf ago of a Taanis sha'os, that is where we introduced the concept of Tefillas Taanis. We're going to say Tefillas Taanis is the Aneinu prayer. Let's at least begin the next topic of today. And that is exactly where in the Shemona Esrei do we articulate the Aneinu prayer. Now, we mentioned, I want to repeat in brief, that we actually only say Aneinu, even during a communal fast day. A Yachid only says it by Mincha. The Shliach Tzibur says it Shachris. And we explained one of the reasons that they bring down in the Noise Kelim is because a person who undertook or is bound by halacha to fast an entire day, theoretically they can say Aneinu in the morning. But if they break their fast during the day, retroactively they said words that are in vain. And that's especially true if it's a standalone bracha. It's accepted that if a person already is fasting by mincha, especially if the mincha is the way we daven mincha towards the end of the fast, and we daven mincha towards the end of the fast as we began in today's shiur, because there's a special amount of eis ratzon. It's the right moment to ask for mercy. Hashem is in a merciful mode, kaviyachol. Dafka towards the end of the fast day. If you're fasting by mincha, you're going to make it till the end of the fast. The Shliach Tzibur that's representing everyone, he gets to say Aneinu in the morning, because even if he as a Yachid won't be able to finish his fast, but in the community people are fasting. And we have the bottom line is that the Shliach Tzibur says a standalone prayer. In other words, we know what we do, but now we're going to the root, which is beautiful. How did it all begin? It began with a machloikas. So Loisa, the Tanisa, Heichamat Kirinon, where in the Shemona Esrei do we mention the prayer of the fast day, which is Aneinu? So let's start. Rav Yehuda was once walking his son, Rabbi Yitzchak. The father was taking his son for a spatzir. And what does Yidden do? You have to walk and you have to do exercise. Learn while you do exercise. And as he's taking a walk with Darash, he tells his son like this, that Yochid shekibel all of Taanis, even a Yochid, even though, as we learned in the past daf, that a Taanis Yochid is of a lesser madrega, nevertheless, mispalel shel Taanis, that Yochid will daven Aneinu. Now, the Heichan Amra, where does he say it? Says the father says Rabbi Yehuda to his son Rabbi Yitzchak, Ben Goyel L'Roifem. Ben Goyel L'Roifem means it's a stand-alone bracha. It's exactly the way we have it in our Siddur, which is said by the Shliach Tzibur, but we're not speaking about a Shliach Tzibur. He's speaking about a Taanis Yach. Azoid gesagt the Tata to his son, and these guys, they're going for a long walk because they have a lot to talk about here. So Maskva Rabbi Yitzchak asks Rabbi Yitzchak to his father, in principle, an individual is not important enough to justify adding a standalone bracha. You know, nowadays that we learned this together in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, where there's an inyan to add words, your own private prayer in your prayer. You never add a bracha, God forbid. Right? In Shemei Tefilla, before you say the words Ki'ata Shemei Tefilla Skolpeh, you can add your personal prayer. Many people add their personal prayers after they finish all of the brachas, before they take the steps back, before the second Yehulah Ratzin Refi. But a Yachid doesn't justify adding a bracha. And therefore, he argues with Rav Yehuda. Elo Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. that where does the Yachid add Anenu? Yeah, you say Anenu. You add Anenu. But you only do it b'shoymei tefillah, in the shoymei tefillah prayer. It's not a standalone bracha. And the Chen Amar Rav Sheshes is siding with Rabbi Yitzchak against Rabbi Yehuda that a Yachid only says Anenu inside a bracha b'shoymei tefillah. And now let us start. Meisvei, this kasha will be against Rabbi Yitzchak. A kasha against, against Rav Sheshes. It says in a brayso, Ein bein Yachid l'tzibur. No difference between a private fast day, a public fast day. Elo shez a Yachid mispalel shmoyne esrei. He'll end up davening shmoyne esrei. Mashma that he says Anenu in shomei tefillah. But the tzibur mispalel sha esrei. Now hold on. How is that a kasha against Rabbi Yitzchak? That sounds like Rabbi Yitzchak. No. Asks the Gemara, what does this Yachid mean? What does this tzibur mean? It can't mean what it always means. And the tzibur means the shliach tzibur. It can be. Why can it not be? Because if the tzibur means the shliach tzibur, something that we did not yet learn, but we already quoted once, we'll have that soon, and we're going to see when it began. But at some point in the fast days that we are learning about lack of rain, they would add not 18 brachas in the Shemona Esrei, but they would add 6 additional brachas, which would make that Amida prayer be one of 24 brachas. So it says, if the Shliach Tzibur Hani Sha Esrei, what do you think they only added Anenu? No, if it's a Taanis Tzibur, then it should be Esrim Ba'arba Hava. There are the additional 6. We're going to learn this in the Mishnah Daf Tezvav. So therefore, the pshat of this brayso must mean Elalav Hachi Kamer. Does it not mean that what? Ein ben Yachid. Listen to these words. The kibel all of Taanis Yachid. Let's go back to what we learned in the last daf. So we have a private fast day. We have a hours fast day. Then we have a real fast day. Real fast day means the whole daytime. But even the whole daytime, if you remember, Shmuel said, then the Gemara says, no, not good enough, because you don't know what type of fast day are you being makabel. You can take upon yourself to do a Taanis Yachid. You can take upon yourself to do a Taanis Tzibur. That is what it must mean. If it's a proper Taanis Tzibur, it's going to be a 24 Amida prayer. We're speaking about 18 or 19. It must be that we're speaking just about a Yachid. And the Bryce is telling you like this, that if a Yachid says the words, I am being makabel on myself, a Taanis Yachid, there is where he would add Anenu in Shemei Tefillah. But a Yachid that's makabel all of Taanis Tzibur, there he makes a standalone bracha. So what do we see? Rabbi Yitzchak argued with his father because he made a blanket statement that a Yachid never has the power. A Yachid is never important enough to justify adding a standalone bracha in the Shemona Esrei. Here you see, no, if the meaning of tzibur means a Yachid shekibel all of Taanis tzibur, shmami no, Yachid kaveya bracha la'atzmai, kasha on Rabbi Yitzchak. Answers the Gemara. Now there's 2 answers. We'll finish the first and then we'll continue tomorrow. It's a big hamshich up here. No, the pshat in the Baraisa is shliach tzibur. Yachid, no matter what the Yachid said, a Yachid who says, I'm a Kabul, Taanis Tzibur, he never makes his own Anenu Bracha. He puts it in Shemei Tefillah. The Bryce is speaking about that when the Shliach Tzibur is repeating the Shemona Esrei on a communal fast day, on a public fast day, there are 19 brachas. You have a kasha. If it's a Taanis Tzibur, there should be 24. Or the kasha Shliach Tzibur Esrei va'arba matzlei, he davens 24 brachas. Answers the Gemara, begimel Taanis Rishonos, just like we learned on Daf Yud. Not all the communal fast days were on the same level. The first 3 were very lenient. In the first 3, they didn't add any brachas. Vir deleke esrim ba'arba. Frag the Gemara, I veloy. It says ein bein. Ein bein means there is no difference. Ein bein gimel rishonos legimel emtsois. It says in this brayso that there isn't any difference between the first 3 fast days of Daf Yud. Legimel emtsois to the 3 that we learned on Daf Yud Beis Amid Beis. Elo shebe'elu, during the first fast days, mutar masiyas malacha, and ube'elu asur masiyas malacha, which implies that both of them share the commonality that you say the 24 brachas. It means every communal fast day, demands 24 brachas. I want to remind everyone that we quoted Shmuel in the last year that says that there isn't a public fast day in Goyla. So don't ask questions. We don't have that. But in Eretz Yisrael, when Beis Din was Mesaken during the times of Chazal, a public fast day, does that not mean that every time there was a communal fast day, they would daven a longer shman, they would daven a 24 brach? Answers the Gemara, ton of a That's not true. You left over other distinctions. Now, you can say that when there are other things other than the number of Shemon Esres. My shiur, the high shiur, number one. Number two, Visu, it says Ein Bein. When the Brisa says Ein Bein, it means there's no difference. So answers the Gemara, Ella, Tana be'isura komaida. The Brisa is only speaking about prohibitions. And the only difference is regarding Isur Malacha, but the Brisa is not speaking about prayers. And therefore, I can argue that the prayers that we are talking about, even during the first three, they daven a 24. So we're going to leave off over here. And God's willing to be continued. We're going to come back. We're going to review this, and then we're going to continue tomorrow.
Yes,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Koyach.
We're coming back.